Hi everybody. In this video, we're going to learn how to create a morph animation. Well, creating is a bit of a stretch. We're going to learn how to fake a morph animation instead. And here's what I mean by this. Morphing shapes and things from one state to another is really cool. And you might have seen this a lot in various animation tools you might have used before, but if you're not familiar with them, let's look at some examples. So I went to Dribble and just searched for morph animation, and you can see a lot of cool examples that others have created. So for example, here's an example of a matchstick that gets turned into a variety of different shapes. And notice how seamless and smooth it is. We're not changing the traditional position, opacity, size, and things like that. The morph animations are more elaborate. You actually start with one particular shape, and then elements of that shape end up being modified to create the next sequence of visuals that you end up seeing. So it's definitely more elaborate. That was more elaborate. Here's a more simple one where like various letters are being changed from one letter to another. So you have a lot of things going on, and I can spend hours on this because a lot of some really cool things that people have created. Like this is really cool. You have like simple geometric shapes that go from a square to a triangle, another triangle, and things like that. So these are the kind of animations that you often see people create, and what we want to do is like see how we can create this on the web. But unfortunately, many kinds of morphs are very difficult to do. Even with SVGs, where you have more control over the various vector endpoints, you don't have a lot of freedom, and it's just the nature of how the web is currently set up. All the animations you might have seen in Dribble a few moments ago were not created using HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. They were probably created in After Effects or any other advanced animation tool where you have much better support for going from one state to another, especially if you're changing properties that are more fungible, I guess. So the solution is this. The solution is to fake the morph. And what I mean by this is, let's take a look at an example. So here I have an example where we have a burger on one side and a plate of eggs on the other. So you're basically going from, an unhealthy meal to something more healthy, I guess. But notice how it looks. It's not a true morph. You don't exactly see the intermediate states, but as animations go, it's pretty smooth. You go from one state to another, and it looks kind of realistic. That's thanks to some of the easing and some of the techniques that we looked at that make some of these animations look more realistic. And we're just using some tricks to make that happen. And here's how this animation actually works. So we have a starting point, and a starting point is an SVG of a burger on a plate. And the ending point is eggs on a plate instead. So the goal of what we're trying to do is go from this state to the end state without having the morph that you traditionally would experience in more elaborate animation systems. And the way we created this is by having two distinct animations. The first part of the animation, the burger slides from left to right, and then it fades out. At the moment of it fading out, we start the animation for the egg, where the egg starts off invisible, and then suddenly becomes visible again. And we keep jumping back and forth on this, where we alternate the direction to make it look like you just have one seamless animation. So the trick really is how do we stitch together two distinct animations to make it look like one animation? And that's enough of the high-level overview of how this works. Now we're going to look into the HTML and CSS to actually see how we can do something like this. So to help you get started, there is a code pen that I created. So go to bit.ly/createamorph. And once you've done that, you'll see an example that looks exactly like this. So you can use CodePen, but I'm a big fan of using VS Code. So I'm in VS Code right now, and if you were to load everything up, you'll see basically what looks like two images currently displayed side by side on a dark gray div. So nothing too fancy here. And if you look at the markup, we have some CSS that defines just the appearance that we see right now. We have our HTML has a div element called container, and then we have two images. They're both SVGs. They have a class value of item, which is shared between both of them, and each of the individual images has an ID value of eggs and burger. And if you look at the style rule, nothing crazy going on here. The important part is that the item class has a height value, which is what specifies the size of these images. Its position is set to absolute because we really don't care about regular layout. And I'm using align self center using one of the flexbox properties to keep them aligned just where we want them to be. And right now for eggs, we're starting it in the middle of our current location, and I have transform to the translate 3D 225 and a vertical position of 30 pixels, and of course Z order is set to 0. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started. So the way we're going to do this is first let's animate the burger left and right. So I'm going to look at my notes very quickly to make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, so for burger, let's get started by having an animation. So I'm actually going to be using the longhand properties on this one, and you'll see why in a few moments. So let me have animation name. Let's give it a name of burger slide. Seems like an appropriate name for it. And let's go and create the burger slide keyframe. Let's see, let's go to Add Keyframes, burger slide. And let's go ahead and specify for the burger slide the 0% mark. And let's just go ahead and specify the 50 and 100% marks as well. So the 0%, we're going to do transform, translate 3D, 50 pixels, 0 pixels, 0. So when the animation starts, it's literally going to be where we have our default position right now. Just have it be shifted over by about 50 pixels. And what we want to have at the end is at the 100% mark. We want it to go from where it is to 200 pixels, essentially where our egg image currently is located. So 200 pixels, 0 pixels, and 0. All right, so we have done this so far. Let's go and just refresh this page, see what's going on. Of course, you won't see anything. The reason is we don't have a duration or anything like that specified. So let's go ahead and fix that right now. Animation duration, well, let's make it about 1.2 seconds. Animation duration, 1.2 seconds. And let's also set the animation iteration count, how many times it's going to loop, to an infinite value. Infinite. All right, burger slide, 1.2 seconds, infinite. Now let's refresh the page. Notice what we see here. Right now we have our burger image sliding from where it started, about 50 pixels off, to the center where the egg image mostly is positioned. And what we want to do though is not just have it slide left and just stop right there. Let's actually have it loop back and forth. So we're going to actually specify animation direction, and use a value of alternate. I think I misspelled it, animation direction alternate. All right, so now you'll see that the image slides from one direction to another and it keeps looping back and forth. All right, this is a good first step. Now let's go ahead and define the animation for eggs. Now, to kind of give you a preview of what we're going to be doing, if you had to look at it backwards, we're going to have two animations that are going to be moving from left and right, and we're going to time the start point of each one to make it look like it is one animation. So, we're going to jump back and forth between the burger animation and the egg animation, so bear with me while we kind of look at some of these awkward intermediate states as part of getting there. So now let's go ahead and animate the eggs animation. So for this one, I'm going to create another animation name, and we'll give it the name eggs slide. And then we'll give it, let's see, anything else? Nope, we'll just give it an animation timing duration of also 1.2 seconds. And we'll also have it give an animation direction. Actually, not direction. Yeah, direction of alternate. We want it to loop as well. All right, so let's go ahead and define the keyframes. Add keyframes. Give it the value of eggs slide. And let's define the 0% mark, which would look kind of like, okay, transform, translate 3D, 200 pixels, 30 pixels, 0. We're just setting it as a starting point to be where it is currently. And then we'll set its 100% mark to be transform, translate 3D, 350 pixels, 30 pixels, and 0. We forgot to add the iteration count, so animation iteration count, and this will be infinite, so now it runs forever. So now let's play it. And so now you can see both of these images are sliding back and forth, kind of like what we want them to, but we want to stagger the timing of each so that the egg starts sliding at the exact same point the burger reaches its destination. And so the way we're going to do that is this. There is no real way to delay when an animation actually gets started in the web. You can use the animation delay property to figure out when it's going to delay its beginning, but you can't actually hold an animation at the end for a period of time. There's no property for that. So what we're going to do is actually kind of fake it by using the keyframe values. So a keyframe is literally the time it takes to go, your duration, from the 0% mark to the 100% mark. Now, what if we got to a 100% mark way earlier than the full 1.2 second duration? And what if we used the remaining time as a way of just delaying it, of just holding our animation from being able to go further? And so that's exactly what we're going to do. So for example, for our burger slide, we're going to change the value from 0% to 100%. We're actually going to say at the 50% mark as well, you're going to be holding the value. So our animation is going to get from the 250 pixels to 200 pixels at the halfway point itself. And it's going to stay there for the remainder of the time until it gets to the 100% mark. Now let's look at what this looks like if we were to refresh this example. So notice that when I refreshed it, the burger goes to the middle, but it is not actually immediately sliding back. It gets there in about half the time, 0.6 seconds. It waits for 0.6 seconds, and then it goes back to the very beginning. And we're going to do something very similar for our eggs animation as well. So in this case, instead of holding at the very end, we're going to hold the very beginning. So instead of it being 0% and 100%, it'll be 0% and 50%. So the very beginning is going to hold its original value for 0.6 seconds, and it's going to then continue to the end at the last 0.6 seconds. Let's refresh the example right now. So notice now that you have this kind of staggered movement where the burger starts at the left, goes to the middle, and once it gets there, the egg slides as part of it. So this is progress. This is exactly what we're trying to do. Now what we need to do is kind of hide the animation as it's getting to its destination. And we don't want the hide to be something that's very gradual. We don't want to have the animation start fading out from the very beginning. Ideally, we want it to just fade out very suddenly towards the end, just as it's about to hit its point where it's going to stop, and the other animation picks up. So for that, I'm going to create another keyframe. Let's have the eggs first. Add keyframes. Let's call this eggs hide. And in this one, just like before, we're going to have a 0% keyframe and a 50% keyframe. And we're going to set opacity here to 0, which means for the first 0.6 seconds of animation, which is half our animation duration, it'll run for exactly half the time. It'll have an opacity of 0. In other words, it won't be visible. And now, immediately from the 55% mark or the 100% mark, we'll have the opacity be 1. What this means is, for 5% of our animation's duration, which is a very, very small duration, the opacity is going to suddenly change from 0 to 1. So it won't be instantaneous, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to be almost identical. So let's go ahead and add this keyframe to our animation. So I'm going to change egg slide from having 1 keyframe associated with it to 2. Let's call this eggs hide. All right, so if I refresh this, notice that the egg animation is invisible, and as it slides though, it becomes visible again, which is kind of cool. Let's do the same thing for our burger animation as well. Let's go and create a burgers hide keyframes burger hide. And what we're going to specify here is something very similar essentially. We're going to specify at the 45% mark, which is, if you look at our earlier animation, which is the 5% mark just before it, so 5% of our duration, something's going to happen. We'll set opacity to 1, so which is perfect, exactly what we want it to be. And then from the 50% mark to the 100% mark, we want it to go with opacity of 0. Let's refresh the example right now. So notice that now, if I were to, I didn't actually associate it with it. That's a common mistake that you might run into. Defining a keyframe isn't enough. It needs to be actually associated with the animation declaration. So now I refresh it, the burger disappears, and the egg appears immediately afterwards. So this technically looks okay, but it definitely doesn't look realistic. It looks kind of janky in many ways. And this is where an easing function comes in. What we're going to do though is have an easing function that accelerates the burger from a slow speed to a fast speed, and then the egg animation starts from there without having acceleration, but it starts off the gate just running really, really quickly. So for that, we're going to go ahead and define a timing function. And so the timing function we're going to use though is going to be, for the burger slide, it's going to be animation timing function. And of course it's going to be cubic Bezier because there isn't any good built-in function that's going to do this for us properly. 0.77, 0.01, 1, and 0.5. And if you've seen my previous videos, I don't come up with this on my own. I go to cubicbezier.com, which is a great website for being able to define what the animation keyframes and a timing function will look like. Let me hit refresh right now. And notice at this point, the burger suddenly disappears after accelerating. And it looks more realistic because it almost seems like the speed that is being handed off to the egg animation just kind of matches. It speeds up, disappears, and the egg animation just carries a torch from where it was left off. but that's not really good enough. Let's go ahead and modify the animation for the eggs as well. So animation, timing function. Let's give it another cubic Bezier as value as well. And in this case, the numbers are going to be 0, 0.88, 0.21, 0.94. And you can do some experimentation on your own to find what is more realistic, but this seems to work for our case. So now I have the animation going, and notice that the egg appears, the burger appears, but where they change from one electron in the middle is almost invisible. We can't really see it. And it's a very simple way of being able to go from one value you can't really animate to another value you can animate to, which is really two very distinct images. So that's really all there is to the markup for this. Now, obviously we can do some optimization. So for example, you notice that the direction and iteration count are pretty much the same across both. Instead of having it in the eggs style rule and the burger style rule duplicated, I can actually move them to the .item style rule so that that way it's a little cleaner. And I'm just going to do that right now because it's just good practice to keep your markup as clean as possible. And same for duration. We don't have to have it be distinctly defined for each element. We can actually just have it be shared across all the items because we do have the class item associated with both the burger image and the eggs image. And if I refresh it, nothing changes because all we do is just move some markup around. We didn't actually change how the particular example works. So there you have it, a very quick overview of how to fake a morph animation, because morph animations are cool. And the way you can fake them in at least one approach I've shown you is by literally having two different animations where we kind of play some visual tricks at the point where one animation disappears and the other one begins. So all this should be pretty straightforward to you, but the only thing that might be a little confusing that I'll have to cover in a separate video is really that whole idea of like faking an animation delay at the end of your animation. We do have the property to be able to specify how late an animation starts, but that we don't have one to specify how long an animation must wait before it starts over again. And the trick I showed you where you can use the keyframes is one that is currently the only technical solution that you have available for it. So make the best of it, and hopefully in the future we might have something more elegant. But until then though, the keyframe trick of trying to fake a delay is totally valid. So if you need any help or you just want to chat more about this animation, go ahead and post in the forums at forum.crypt.com. And of course, tell your friends and enemies if you want to have them create cool animations so that the web isn't static and boring. To be notified of more videos like this, go to hit subscribe so you can boost up my followers count and help motivate me to create more animations. Follow me on Krupa for bite-sized updates on animation stuff and a lot of cat videos. We got a new cat recently, cat named Pixel, so you'll probably see a lot of stuff about him. And of course, buy my book, Creating Web Animations. It contains a lot of cool stuff about how to create animation things, mostly to focus on user interface development. So you won't see a lot of stuff on Canvas or SVG and things, but you see more practical stuff that'll help make your UIs come to life very quickly. So check it out. It's by O'Reilly. And there's a really cool bird on the cover. It's a macaw. And if you like macaws or if you like animations, go ahead and buy one. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.